The House of Mouse is falling down.
Like, Disney is that third-party company. They are the DEI department. Lucasfilm is the DEI department, and now Marvel is too.
Yeah, like delving too much into identity politics, which by their nature are divisive. Of course they are.
The reality is that when you start saying woke or DEI, there's another implication there where you're implying in many ways that what is the opposite of lack of diversity in those films? It's feeding to an all-white cast or majority white cast and the lack of diversity.
Nerdrotic and Critical Drinker join Piers Morgan to deduce why once big movie studios are dying at the box office. Oh, and don't let me forget, they're also joined by Ernest. No, not that guy. This one's even worse.
Let's keep it 100.
Today we'll talk about the stories we tell each other as a culture and why they matter on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. My name is Reed Huberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And honestly, if you're already watching this video, it's just one more click to subscribe, and it's well worth your time. Today, our show is sponsored by our friends over at CMG Home Loans. If maybe during COVID you got trapped in one of those god-awful loans and a high interest rate, as rates are starting to drop, it's now a great time to kind of reassess your family's financial future and what you can do to try to help secure more income coming your way by either purchasing a new home or by refinancing your existing home. Whatever the case, CMG can help you with all of that. All you have to do is log into cmghomeloans.com, and then you can see all the way our friends over there can help you. And when you do that, make sure to let them know that Indie Thinker sent you. Today I want to respond to a video that took place between Piers Morgan on his show Uncensored, I think it's called, and Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic. Both of those guys kind of make up the commentariat class on YouTube in terms of pop culture. I listen to Nerdrotic very often and less frequently to Critical Drinker, but both of them have really good things to say. And I think the conversation in and of itself is worth listening to, but I also want to interact with it in a way that I don't think they really get to in their 20-minute or so conversation, especially in light of what we see happening in movies all the time. And because I think, especially on this show, I try to talk about why Christianity is important to culture. And even if you're not a Christian, I hope you can at least agree that as a society, we're going to have to build our culture on a foundation. We can't just build it on autonomous individualism, but we have to build it on some shared values. And if we don't, we will find that the foundation that we built our house on will eventually fail, and this thing that we've built will ultimately crumble to the ground. Oddly enough, much like what that guy Jesus said. But anyway, even if you disagree with my values and what I think about Christianity, I hope we can all agree to this, that there is something going on in modern day cinema. I just recently went to the movies to watch Transformers 1 with my kids, and as I always do, I had to check the reviews and make sure they weren't going to hide any trans flags in the background or try to import trans ideology or any other kind of left-wing identity politics on the backs of these Transformers into this movie so that they could pump it into the minds of my small children. And I was pleasantly surprised. And I guess that's the story at the end of the day. It's become far too common to be disappointed by movies, especially for children, because of the way modern day movies are being deconstructed. But in this film, there was a strong male lead unapologetically. The movie also went deeper and suggested even that all of us are maybe born with something missing, maybe in the core of our heart. And I don't want to give too many spoilers here, but also the movie might even get to the place where it shows faith. Now, they call it optimism in the film, and just think that if you're just a insufferable moron and you think all kind thoughts, no matter what's happening around you, that's good. But ultimately, the movie really means to say faith, believing in something, even if you don't see it, is actually a good thing. And then the thing that really takes the cake is the idea of sacrifice, which is shown in this movie. Again, don't want to give spoilers, but there might be a time where a guy is willing to give his life and then die and then even get resurrected. So again, as you can just see from my brief description of this movie, all of these ideas we're told in society today are totally antiquated, and you don't find them very often. I had to check my watch just to make sure that we were in 2024 while I was watching this movie. It was a breath of fresh air. So the real question at the end of the day is, what's behind the deconstruction of modern cinema? Well, we'll hear from Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker, and our buddy Ernest on the subject, and then I'll add something as we kind of interact with the video. So let's jump into it.
Disney's last 4 big releases have bombed at the box office. The company is currently no longer Hollywood's #1 film studio. Recent box office takings show even Marvel has lost its, Marvel. And critics say the reason is simple. Disney's prioritized identity politics over entertainment, pushing messages audiences don't want or need to hear. So have they got a point? Well, to discuss all that and more, 2 titans of YouTube are returning to Uncensored by popular demand, Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic. I mean, otherwise known as Will and Gary, but I prefer your stage names, guys. We're going to stick to those. Also here to debate is Uncensored contributor Esther Krakow and the author for The Case for Cancel Culture, Ernest Owens, which is one of the worst named titles of a book, Ernest, I can ever envisage, but we'll let that pass. All right, let's start with Disney, because there's a huge civil war raging with Disney, with board members, investors, all trying to work out what is going wrong with the recent series of flops, because Disney is not used to having flops. Nelson Peltz, who's a serious investor in Disney, has criticized Disney's woke strategy in an interview with the Financial Times. He said, why do I have to have a Marvel movie that's all women? Not that I have anything against women, but why do I have to do that? Why do I need an all-black cast? What do you think of this? I mean, Critical Drinker, there's no doubt Disney's in a pretty poor run at the moment. How much of that is down to woking up the movies?
I mean, I think it's definitely a factor, but it's part of a much bigger picture that incorporates other issues like a general decline in storytelling quality, a prioritization of quantity over quality, and like delving too much into identity politics, which by their nature are divisive. Of course they are. And so all of those different factors working together have slowly undermined their creative output to the point where all of their major franchises are failing. Star Wars is kind of a disaster at the moment. The Marvel Cinematic Universe that used to be this money printing behemoth is churned out flop after flop in recent years, and even their own unique animation movies like Wish,
Haunted Mansion flop, Pixar flops all over the place.
Yes, exactly. All of those different aspects of their creative output have flopped, and they've got nowhere to go at this point. Clearly, something has to change. What they're doing is not working anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Nerdrotic, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, a comic book tale featuring a strong female lead. The Marvels, a comic book movie featuring a diverse cast of strong female leads. Elemental, Disney's first animation featuring their first strong non-binary lead. All flops. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not. People who are intent on attacking Disney saying, well, this is because they're pursuing a strategy that's not based on just producing great movies. They're pursuing a strategy trying to appease the woke brigade, who will come hunting for them if they deviate from the woke worldview. Your thoughts?
The woke brigade that's within their building, right? So,
right.
We see all these third-party companies in gaming that's going off right now. But like Disney is that third-party company. They are the DEI department. Lucasfilm is the DEI department, and now Marvel is too. And it was really easy for comic book fans to figure this out because we read the comic books. She-Hulk, for example, was a great comic book. It was reverent. It broke the fourth wall. That the famous run is by John Byrne, and I love the comic book. She-Hulk was a member of the Fantastic Four. This is one of my favorite female Marvel characters, and they destroyed her because they don't know what they're doing. I did a clip in one of my videos of all of the writers for most of the Disney Plus, stating that they didn't know anything about the comics and they didn't read the comics. And that's part of the reason, because they're just there for identity politics. It's simple. We used to joke about they're just checking boxes when they're literally checking boxes now.
So from Critical Drinker, there's multiple issues, including and probably foremost among them, bad storytelling. And then Nerdrotic goes a little bit further and says DEI and checking off boxes is the thing that's really what's wrong with these stories. Now, here's what I would say to that. I would say that, yes, there is a sense in which the people who are making movies today have apparently gotten so bored with telling good stories that now they're at the bottom of the barrel and they're trying to drum up some story about identity as though that matters. And I personally, and I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section, I could care less about identity and care way more about story. But there's something deeper than just this focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion and these superficial character traits that identify people that now we want to try to celebrate as though it were something that were meaningful. It's not true that your identity in the way we're talking about it in the modern era is worthy of celebration. That's just not true. So here's an example of what I mean by that. When you die, on your tombstone, it is not going to tell you the color of your skin. It's not going to say anything about who you necessarily had sex with or what kind of sex you enjoyed. Why? Because what's on your tombstone is not going to be about whatever rights you think you had while you were here on this earth or whatever marginalized identity status you can come up with. Because the things that we celebrate, especially when we look back on a person's life, have nothing to do with those superficial character traits. It has everything to do with duty, the obligations that we take on willfully, not the things that we were born with that are immutable characteristic traits like the color of our skin or our biology. So again, it's not going to say gay woman, rest in peace. It's going to say this: loving husband and father. See, these duties that we willingly take upon ourselves, when we do hard things as a society, rather than complain and whine about those things and how oppressive society is, when we actually take these duties upon ourselves, that is what distinguishes us as a person who lived a life worth living. So what I mean is that movies should celebrate those kind of duties, those kind of higher callings, rather than superficial identity. And this is what we're seeing in the modern era, is that many movies have now begun to celebrate things that are not worthy of being celebrated. More often than not today, we're being force-fed stories that we know deep down are not worthy of celebration, and then being told to celebrate or you'll be canceled. So that's why very often people are choosing not to go to the box office and watch the kind of filth that Disney is producing today. And by the way, especially for those of you who are Christians out there, if you are still watching Disney movies, please explain why. I mean, I don't understand what else they have to do to get you to figure out some aspect of personal integrity so that you will no longer support these people who hate the things that you stand for.
This is, I would say, arguably the gayest Star Wars, I think, by a considerable margin. And are you excited about that?
So at the end of the day, here's what I mean. When I say that identity isn't true, I just mean that it's superficial, and that we all know intuitively deep down in the cockles of our heart, maybe even in our soul, if you believe in such a weird thing, deep down in our soul, we know the things that truly make our hearts sing, and it isn't identity. And whenever Hollywood tries to force feed us that nonsense, we're just not going to pay them for lying to us. So they'll continue this conversation as Ernest now jumps in to try to tell us what he thinks from his perspective is really going on with people not wanting to watch movies. So what specifically is going on with Disney? So here's what Ernest has to say.
Right.
Which kills creativity.
Ernest, you'd be sitting there grimacing. I mean, it's clearly demonstrably not working, this strategy. And I've just looking from the outside, look at it and think, yeah, they have been too concerned about identity politics, too concerned about appeasing their very woke workforce. And they should have just stuck to doing what Disney does best, make great family films and make a ton of cash.
So there's a lot of misinformation. And I think the issue is that no one here is actually really reading the real strategy. The problem is several things. There's a missing implication. There has been, arguably, films that were super successful. Black Panther had a predominantly Black cast, not all Black cast, and made $1.3 billion at the box office and had a really successful sequel. The reality is that when you start saying woke or DEI, there's another implication there where you're implying in many ways that what is the opposite of lack of diversity in those films? It's feeding to an all-white cast or majority white cast and a lack of diversity. I don't think that that's what Disney's trying to do, and I don't think that's what Hollywood should do because it doesn't reflect the society we live in. However, what's missing in this conversation is that the reason why a lot of these films are not doing as well is because many of them are spinoffs, sequels, or there's just overall fatigue in the market where people want original stories. So I do think that rather than try to make this a culture war, which really it isn't, it's more of a change in taste from the audiences and what they want. Let's keep it 100. Pixar has not really made too many original films that have really been able to be fully marketed. And there's been an oversaturation of them. There's an oversaturation of Marvel. But if you look at other films elsewhere, there has seemed to be a trend of liking diversity, TV shows, streaming platforms. And so it seems to be a little bit intellectually dishonest to frame it in this way. I think there's another way to look at it.
And I'll come to Esther in one second. I mean, I would just say, my favorite movie the last few years was Top Gun Maverick, because it just did what it said on the tin, right? The guys behaved like guys, the women behaved like women, bad guys got slotted, and the good guys were heroes. I mean, that used to be how movies got made in Hollywood. They celebrated the basics in life.
Last week on the show, I talked about subtext, and here you have it from our buddy Ernest. So, if you don't like DEI in the movies, if you don't think that a woman, average woman, can beat the hell out of a man, well, it's simply because you're a racist. You're a misogynist, of course. You're an interminable racist, and down deep in your soul, you wish you could light crucifixes on fire. Go get your white pajamas and just reveal to the world what we all deeply know about you, which is that you're a racist. Now, maybe it has something to do with hero fatigue, like Ernest says. I'd be willing to admit that, but I know I personally would be perfectly happy to watch any hero movie that came out in the present, as long as it was telling us the truth, and as long as it wasn't trying to pass on some kind of agenda that we know is deeply flawed. Maybe, I don't know, lesbian space witches miraculously having children.
We were blessed with a miracle, the gift of life.
Gay! If they weren't trying to lie to us so flippantly, it wouldn't be that big of a problem. So he brings up Black Panther as one of his, tests of this ideology. So Black Panther was very successful, and that was all about an all-black cast. Well, yes, Black Panther was incredibly successful, and it was an all-black cast, so it seems to be identitarian in that way, except for the fact that it was a movie about an African culture. And I don't know if you know anything about African culture, but it's largely black.
No! Yes. A bit.
Well, I mean, save for this one African American, one of my favorite African Americans, Elon Musk. So yes, an all-black cast in a movie about an African culture kind of makes sense. In fact, when I watched Hotel Rwanda, I wasn't really that angry that I didn't see more white people. So the idea of Black Panther being an exception to this rule is ridiculous. It goes back to the idea that we just want to be told the truth. When we are given black movies or LGBTQ movies, we don't want to watch that because it isn't the truth. We don't live in an all-black society, and we don't live in a society where anybody would want to watch an LGBTQ movie in the first place. The point I'm trying to make is that if you're creating a movie specifically with an agenda other than to tell the truth, then we don't want to watch that crap. And this is why those kind of movies are bombing at the box office. The difference between a good movie and a movie that is purely activism is that it celebrates something true. Now, a movie can be a movie built upon activism if it's celebrating something true. In fact, I would argue one of my favorite movies, Braveheart, is a movie about activism. It's about standing up for your freedom, and it's worth dying for. But the reason that kind of activism is celebrated is because it's activism for something that is true and something that is good. Whereas lesbian space witches isn't something that is a good. That is a deprivation of the good. Even an honest lesbian would tell you, because I've had conversations with people about this very thing. They would tell you that the ideal situation for a child is to be raised by a mother and a father, biological parents taking care of that child. That is the best way to raise a child. So even an honest homosexual would say this. But many people, when they hear this, will immediately jump to the red herring and they'll say, so you're telling me that you would rather have a child die of starvation on the street than to be raised by two lesbians? Of course, that's a red herring because I didn't say anything like that. What I said is that in an ideal situation, we would want the child to be raised by its biological parents, which would mean its mother and its father. And that is the ideal way to do that, and that movies should praise ideals. IDEAS, but IDEALS too, the highest ideals of a society. This is worthy of celebration. But the real problem here is that the kind of people who are making movies today in Disney and in other places are not willing to celebrate those ideals because they have been steeped in an ideology that they learned in the academy called postmodernism. And of course, postmodernism is the idea that there is no such thing as universal truths or objective truths. It's the idea that there is only subjective truth. So in other words, you have your truth and I have my truth, but there is no competition between higher values and lesser values. There is just my opinion and your opinion. And of course, this gives rise to moral relativism, where you can't actually say something is really intrinsically evil, like what took place in the Holocaust or anything like that. So postmodernism is absolutely rotting the brains of people in the academy, and these people in the academy then go on to make the kind of movies that we see. And the problem with that, again, is that postmodernism doesn't tell the truth because it doesn't actually believe in the kind of objective truths that movies really are all about when they are at their best. So, movies, by virtue of celebrating the highest of ideals, will marginalize lesser truths, and that's good, unless you're a postmodernist. And then you will want to try to say there is no such thing as one culture that's better than another culture. Like, what world are we living in that we actually think that there isn't one culture that's better than another culture? So you think that the cannibalistic culture is on par with the constitutional republic of America. So whether you get up in the morning and have to worry about getting your children eaten is just as good as getting up in the morning and worrying about what kind of socks you're going to wear that morning. No, we all know that there are higher truths in society, and those higher truths need to be celebrated. But there are people in the world today that don't want to acknowledge that, because if they do, they may have to repent of the lesser truths that they have been celebrating, or worse, of the lies that they have been peddling. And we'll hear more about this in this final clip.
Okay, let's turn to Sydney Sweeney, this cultural phenomenon, being called a double D antidote to woke. Canada's National Post posed the question, are Sydney Sweeney's breasts double D harbingers of the death of woke? And they summarise the argument by saying, we've spent years being chastised for desiring or admiring beauty because beauty is rare and exclusionary, and to exclude is to hate. Also, we've been scolded to accept by today's diversity, equity and inclusion fanatics. We aren't supposed to admire Sweeney's beauty, but we've done it anyways. The times, they are a-changing. Critical drinker, are they changing? Has Sydney Sweeney's cleavage basically spelled the beginning of the end of woke?
I just love the idea that Sydney Sweeney's breasts have somehow become a political movement. I mean, that's the one aspect of politics I can definitely get into. But
what Piers just read is 100% the point. And this is why I wanted to share this with you guys today, because we live in a culture that says that exclusionary thinking is tantamount to hate. So if you exclude any idea as being of lesser value or a lie, then you are excluding that person's truth and that person's ability to be able to celebrate that thing, even if it isn't true, or if it isn't good, or if it isn't beautiful. But the truth of good storytelling is that it is exclusionary. On the screen, we want to see the good. But postmodernism can't celebrate that because it does not have an objective truth standard by which it can say something is good. This is why we get things like body positivity stories. Like, we're supposed to celebrate the fact that a person is morbidly obese and killing themselves, when we all know that good storytelling is not that. Good storytelling is a person who is willing to sacrifice and push and work hard and work toward a goal. Maybe a movie like Rocky. So what Piers read is 100% the problem. We have this gospel of inclusion society, and whenever we exclude any idea from the public square, we are told that that's somehow hateful and it cannot be done. But the gospel of inclusion is everywhere, and it is just as stupid as it has ever been. And it's eye-roll inducing when you try to tell somebody that a homosexual couple is on par with a heterosexual couple. You know, that whole thing with the reproduction of the human race is kind of important to all of us. So we can debate on a different day the moral values of those kind of acts. But what should be obvious to all of us is that there is an intrinsic good in what our biology tells us, that men and women can reproduce, that should be celebrated and deserves to be honored. But the gospel of inclusion wants to include everything and make it feel as though it's just as good, when we know that that isn't true. So this is what postmodernism is doing to our films. Yes, I understand that the hero can be morally conflicted and can have shortcomings and all of that stuff, but it doesn't deny the fact that there is a difference between good and good and evil exists. But most movies in the modern day don't want to tell stories like that anymore because those are considered overly simplistic, when in fact, what they really are is a reflection of the truth that our souls need to hear. So this is why we don't create epic films anymore like Braveheart, frankly, in my opinion. Braveheart underscored a story of universal value, that freedom is more important than your life. And if you have a life but you don't have freedom, then what do you truly have? Because
that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
When a movie preaches something that deep, it no longer is just a movie. I would consider it a sermon, because now it's telling a universal truth that goes far beyond the mediocrity of the gospel of inclusion and tells a story that binds us all together because it's a universal truth, regardless of gender, regardless of race, and regardless of whatever your background or sexual orientation may be. Let me give you another example of this. Romeo and Juliet is considered by most people to be a love story, and a tragic one at that, but it's way more than that. I remember going through it just recently again and realizing that this is really not a love story at all. It's actually a story about how love without sacrifice is never enough to truly bring people together, because the Capulets and the Montagues are still insufferably at ends with each other, and these two people who love each other couldn't bring them together until they sacrificed their life. Now that is a deep truth that echoes through the ages, that reaches down deep into our soul. Love without sacrifice is not enough. And if I were to go a little bit deeper with you, I would say, well, there is a book that talks about love and sacrifice in its fullest form, maybe seen on the cross, that actually has told this story in its best form. And that's why it permeates today in society. For those of you who are not good with subtext, who might I be talking about?
You do realize I died for your sins, right?
Now, maybe you don't like my irreverent humor, but I'm trying to prove a point here. That movies are at their best when they are telling stories that reach deeper than our brain, deeper than our heart, and reach our soul. We need movies that we will frankly never appreciate until we realize that we have souls and they matter. I cannot help but believe some people reject that because it gets them dangerously close to admitting that if we have a soul, we might be able to trace it back to the person who created us and made us and makes our hearts sing when we celebrate the deep universal truths that the greatest movies depict on the screen. Until we're willing to exclude lies and lesser truths so that we can celebrate the highest good, we may just continue to waste our money and our time at the box office. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below. But most importantly, go with God.